So, welcome to the workshop. My name is Grace. I am a computer science major currently attending college, and I have 11 years of experience in orchestra, specifically for violin. That's like my little self-introduction for you guys. So today we will be introducing you to a music reading workshop, of which essentially is going to be how to read sheet music and the stuff that goes into sheet music, why it's important, and all that good stuff. So let me go ahead and get started here. Okay, so first things first, what is sheet music? According to the Google definition for sheet music is a handwritten or printed form of musical notation that uses musical symbols to indicate the pitches, rhythms, or chords of a song or instrumental musical piece. And in terms of musical composition can refer to an original piece of work of music, either vocal or instrumental, and the structure of the musical piece or the process of creating or writing a new piece of music. Essentially, sheet music is just like what instrument players would look at to be able to know how to play a certain piece, whether that be like a very popular pop song or a very like classical song from like Beethoven or Mozart, just that kind of stuff. Also, if I'm going too fast at any point, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So other areas of music importance for composing. The music theory is essentially studying the syntax of the music, and that I'll explain in more depth later, but that comes with the dynamics, articulation, the tempo, and the rhythm, just to name a few. And they are important because they can help you figure out how to create the structure of your own piece or song's dynamics, tone, rhythm, etc. Essentially, these are all like very key, important things that you have to put into your music. And you can find examples of that in any piece of music that you encounter. And then also studying composers' backgrounds and styles can really help develop your own style in terms of like the music history and also how musical styles have been changed throughout like the decades that it's been existing. For example, the Baroque era from 1600 to 1750, like Bach. And that's important, again, because it helps you see what types of melodies or phrases were common at the time of each period. And then those styles you can add or modify into your own, which it can inspire you to become more creative with your pieces. It can also help you with the motive or backstory of other composers' songs so that you can draw inspiration from that also. And then also draw inspiration from your experience or background on the motive of your composition. Okay. So sheet music comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. If you're not super familiar with sheet music, sometimes it can look as easy as this. This is a canon in D, also known as Pachelbel's canon, for very beginner piano. It can look like this, or it can look something like this, where there's a bunch of annotations. There's a 3/4 signature instead of a standard like 4/4 key signature. There's a lot of slurs, a lot of specific chords that you have to hit, all this kind of stuff. And I will actually be able to go more into depth about what this is and how you could read it. So the different types of articulation in sheet music. This is just like, I want to say, not the basic ones, but the ones you're going to see probably the most often. As someone with orchestral experience, I can only really speak for like string instruments in terms of for like piano players or even like brass players like trombone and stuff like that. You'll also encounter pretty much the same types of articulations. So just to like briefly go over them. There is staccato, which means that your note has to be very short, very disconnected from all the other notes. I wish I like brought my violin so I could actually possibly play it, but it's basically just very short separated notes. An accent is where you really bring power to that note and make it very accentuated. It's like the accent. Sorry. The names for these notes make a lot of sense once you actually put it into practice, but accent notes are basically just like the accent of the sheet music. You want to really put emphasis on it. Tenuto just means that you have to make the note very full, very not stretched out, but kind of a little longer. Things like spiccato and marcato, you're not going to see as often. They're just kind of there. They're just like other versions. Like I know spiccato is like another shorter version of staccato, if I'm remembering this correctly. Legato or a slur, you're most likely going to see in a lot of sheet music for string instruments like violinists and cellos. It's basically where you connect the notes together in one bow. And if you look at the bottom left over here, it says there's a difference between a tie and a slur. The main difference between them is that a tie is going to be the connection between two of the same note. So if we look at this in treble clef, that is connecting two C notes together. And then for a slur, it is connecting a D to a C. Tenuto is essentially just like making the note full, or at least that's what my teachers have taught me. it's having the note be played in full and probably like a little longer than usual. That's like the best way I can describe it, at least. Yeah. Portado is kind of the same thing as legato, but the only difference is that it's between ties instead of a slur. So as you can see, legato isn't a slur, like I explained earlier, because it connects all different kinds of notes. Portado is more like a tie because it connects all the same note. And then going more further into like string instrument articulation, up bow is obviously when you move the bow up, down bow is when you move the bow down, and that is to, most of the time is there because you need to, when you do up bow or down bow, it accentuates different ways. And so it's just important to have that there to make sure you're doing it the right way that the composer wants you to do it. And that's actually the importance of articulation, is so that you are capturing what the composer wanted you to do and how you should be conveying the music, right? Closed essentially just means that your finger on the fingerboard against the string should be completely closed. When it's open, you're creating a harmonic depending on where your finger is, and that's just a very lighter version of that note. A tremolo is where you take your bow and you don't like you don't like shake it necessarily, but it's very small wrist movements to create like a very shaking sound almost. And depending on how many bars there are, as you can see, like the first one has 2 bars and then the one later has 1 bar. Depending on how many bars there are, it depends on how fast you have to go. And then there are other articulations like crescendo, which means that you start soft, get loud. Decrescendo or diminuendo, which means that you start loud and then you end softly. There's piano, which means soft, so you play really quiet, really soft right there. And then there's forte, where you play very loud. Okay. Oh, there we go. And then there are different types of notes in sheet music. So you're going to be encountering notes, you're going to be encountering rests, and you're going to be encountering accidentals. So starting with the notes, very basic ones, you start with a whole note, which counts for all 4 beats. If you look at a measure of music, each measure of music should take up 4 beats. And so when you see a whole note in one, here, let me move back. So you see how right here, there's a whole note next to the legato. It takes up that entire bar because it takes up 4 bars or 4 beats, sorry. So that's why that's there. And then a half note is essentially just half of a whole note. So that's going to be 2 beats. And then the rest on the side are what you will see if you need to stop playing for a certain amount of beats. So a whole note, that little line right there is gonna be on the bottom side of the line. And if it's a half rest, it's gonna be on top of the line. For quarter notes are just 1 beat, and then an 8th note is gonna be half of that, so that's half a beat. 16th note is gonna be half of that, so that's a 4th beat. And then it just kind of keeps going down by halves from there. If you wanna make longer notes or combine notes, you can. I'm forgetting what that term is on the top of my head, but you can combine things like a half note and a quarter note together. You can combine 16th notes and 18th notes. You can combine a whole note and a 16th note if you really wanted to. But yeah, it's all about the length of them. And they all start from the whole note, and then they get a half smaller with each iteration. And then accidentals are what you would put on the note in the sheet music if the not the time signature. If this part next to the clef denotes a certain chord that you have to play, then accidentals are there because it's not naturally part of that. So if we were to do like a D major scale that has D, E, F sharp, and G, sometimes if the piece is originally written in a D major scale, they can put accidentals like a natural or a flat or a double flat to denote that the note should be something that is outside of said D major scale. And that applies to all types of scales. So for example, again, D major scale, if the composer wrote it and the F note, instead of being a sharp like it is in D major, had a flat, that is an accidental, and you would see it be written on top or next to the note in there. So with all that, how do you even read the notes? So for right here, I have both a treble clef and a bass clef. I also refer to treble clef as violin clef and bass clef as a cello or obviously bass clef. That's just because, again, from orchestra experience, sometimes you could just say that and get away with it. But it's important to note that for piano, you actually have to read both of them because when you play piano, your left hand is playing the bass clef parts, and then your right hand is going to be playing the treble clef parts. And so if you're learning piano or already know piano, it's essential for you to know both of these clefs. If you were playing just violin or just cello, you only really need to know one. And so this little chart right here, this little image, lets you understand how to really read all of this. So for treble clef, because I'm a violinist, I can mainly just speak for the treble clef, but we start with an A, which is all the way down on the G string, which if you look at the violin, like facing forward, the G string is going to be the one that is all the way to the left, like the thickest string. That's going to start from A, which is the first finger on the G string, and then B, C, and then D is going to be that second most left string, and then E, F, G, A. A is going to be that third, or I guess second to the right now string. B, C, D, E, and then E is the most right string. F, G, A, B, C. And from E and upward, you're actually going to be scaling that E string almost all the way to like the end of the fingerboard. So any notes higher than this, you're probably just going to be scaling your hand across the E string. Piano, you don't have to worry about that. I can't really speak for other instruments like brass or anything, but I do know that for violin, you just got to keep crawling up that E string. For piano, you just got to make sure your right arm can reach all the way down to the other side of the piano on the right side. And notes like this, where they have little lines across from it, those are called ledger lines because they go past the traditional like four, I guess five, like traditional like 5 lines that you see in every bar. To kind of just like denote like, oh yeah, this is like the next line up, and then that's the next space up, of which I will also explain. So a way to remember these spaces for treble clef is if you start right here at F, and then you go to A, then you go to C, then you go to E, you'll realize that spells face. And so that's how you remember those little spaces for treble clef at least. And then for the lines, starting with E, it goes to E, G, B, D, F. And I think a popular way of remembering that is just thinking that it stands for every good boy does fine. So that's for the lines of treble clef. And then for the spaces, again, is face. For bass clef, these spaces are A, C, E, and G, the same way that face looks on treble clef, but bass clef is different. Another way I like thinking about memorizing the difference between treble clef and bass clef is that bass clef is essentially treble clef, but you're taking the notes 2 steps higher, just in the same position. So if we looked at D, right? For treble clef, D for treble clef is the same thing as F for bass clef in terms of position, and that's only 2 notes higher than D. I don't know if that makes it more confusing or not, but that's just how I like to remember it. But anyway, going back, this. Oh, my microphone changed. So if, oh, now it's not. I'm so sorry about that. Zoom is being weird. So back to the spaces, right? It's A, C, E, and G. And then for the lines, that's going to be G, B, D, F, and A. I'm forgetting what people usually make that stand for because I didn't have to like study bass clef that often, but that's just to let you know. Okay. And then for the piano, going back to accidentals, right? So for these black keys that you see here, they're gonna denote flats and sharps. I wish I wrote this down on the actual presentation, but from C to D, that is a half step, I believe. So it's either a whole step or a half step. I'm actually forgetting, but it goes from C to C sharp, that's a half step, and then D to D sharp, which is also a half step. And if you do it backwards, it's the same thing. So then that's going to be D sharp, or I guess E flat to D, that's also a half step, but just down. And then D sharp to C, which is also a half step down. The reason why D flat and C sharp, and the same thing for like G flat and F sharp, are on the same black key is because they're essentially the same note. If you were to just look at this left side here with C, D, E, if we make E a half note down, that makes it an E flat. But if we make D a half step up, that's going to make it a D sharp. And so that's why E flat and D sharp are the same note. And then the same thing for D flat and C sharp, and then all the other black keys. And then you just kind of apply that to the rest of the piano keys, because music notes only go from C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then they go back to C. Essentially, it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then after G, it goes back to A. Okay. And then there are other things like scales and chords and arpeggios, and there is a major difference between them. So a chord is where you play the same notes in a scale at the same time, or not the same notes, sorry. You play notes in a scale at the same time. And so for right here, it's playing an E, a C, and a G. Not really sure what key it's in, but if you play all those notes together, it'll create something that sounds really pretty and really nice to the ears. And that is a chord that applies to piano, that applies to violin, that applies to any instrument that could play a chord, essentially, like a guitar too, except guitars don't really read sheet music, they read their own thing, but we don't talk about that. Arpeggio is very similar to a chord, except instead of playing it all together, you play it at separate notes. So this G, C, E right here are all being played at different times instead of all being together like the chord is. And then to the bottom right, we see a major scale and a minor scale. There is a difference. Generally, or I guess like more stereotypically, major scales sound a lot happier because they use sharps more often. In comparison to minor scales that use flats and naturals a lot more often. And as you can see here, what I was trying to poorly explain earlier, it goes whole note, half note for a major scale, and then whole note, whole note for a minor scale. This isn't necessarily like a pattern you're gonna see in every single major scale or minor scale, but it is a pattern that you will recognize once you start getting more used to reading sheet music, especially with all these like little accidentals, like I said earlier. It's really just something that comes with practice, and I'm sure you've heard that a lot if you're already familiarized with your instruments. And then I'll let Julia take over the MuseScore stuff.
Hi, my name is Julia, and I'm the founder and president of Bytes and Pieces. So basically, MuseScore is kind of like this platform where you can compose music online. So it's kind of like instead of writing individual notes on a piece of paper, you can just type that into your keyboard. So if you want to download MuseScore, if you have Windows or Mac, you can use those links. And right now, I can show like a demonstration of how MuseScore works. So let me know if you can see my screen. Basically, this is like a test for MuseScore. Also, please type it in the chat so I can see like who can see the screen or not, because I'm not sure how this screen share really works. Sure, thank you. So basically, when you open MuseScore, you have a page like this. Actually, if you were to start new, you would have something like this, and I just typed in test for the title. Here you can choose your instruments. For me, I chose piano. And here you can choose your key signatures. So the most basic or the most like introductory key to choose from is just use none, which is the C major. Here you can choose your time signatures. Most pieces are 4 out of 4, which means that there's like 4 beats per measure. And so you can just choose that. Okay, so here you have your test sheet music. So if you see your keyboard, you have the letters A, B, C, D all the way to G. So those ones correspond to the notes. So for example, A is like the A right here. And then, or actually I think it's easier if I share my sound as well, so you guys can hear this. So that's A, and then B is, if you just type in B, or As you can see, that is basically the A minor scale. You can just type that in using your keyboard. If you want to do chords like what Grace mentioned, you can do, for example, if you want your chord to have A and E, if you want the A to be at the bottom and then E to be at the very top, then you just, first of all, you type in A for the bottom, which is, and then if you want to use E as the top note of the chord, you can just have the shift button. You hold down the shift and then you press E. So then you can have a chord right there. You can also add extra notes to the chord as well. For example, if you want to add like a C, you can do Shift C. But as you can see, that C is now like too high up because most chords they just have like a third and then a fifth. So basically, if you want to bring that C down in the middle of A and E, you can do, I think it's Shift the arrow key down or Control arrow key down. Okay, so what you do is you click this, you click the C, the note that you want to move, and then you press Control down, and then you can have your chord right there. And you can also change like the type of note as well. This one is a quarter note, which is like a quarter beat per measure. If you want to make it longer, you can do like a half note or maybe like a full note as well. Or you can also make it even shorter, like an eighth note or maybe like a 16th note, or no, 16th note, eighth note, or a 32nd note. So that's all the types of things that you can do. You can also use this as well. This is like a tie. So if you want to press this note and then press the shift and then highlight this, if you want to make that a tie, you can just use the slur. Okay, this is actually the tie. So the slur is actually, I think it's in the palette. So you can just do this, and here you can connect them together. So basically, I think as Grace mentioned, the slur just means that in violin you play in one bow, but in piano you play like legato-ly, or you play it as smooth as possible. So that's one way to do that. So in the palette, it's pretty a lot of things. Basically, you can have your clefs, your key signatures if you want to change it. You can also have time signatures. Maybe you want 2/4 instead of 4/4. You can also have accidentals, where you can make a note a half step higher or a half step lower. You can also have articulations as well. So for example, if you want to accent a particular note, you can do this. This just means that you make this one note extra loud. If you go to those grace notes, then you can, if you want to have like a small note in front of a note like this, you can just do this. What this means is that you, on the piano, you just play this grace note really quickly before you move on to this note right here. The lines just means like more dynamic wise. So for example, since this scale is going up, maybe you want to have a crescendo, right? So if you want to press this note right here, the shift button, and then the highest note in the scale, you can just do either this as crescendo or this as crescendo. They're basically the same thing. It's best not to have both. Just good practice to have either one of them. So, or if you want to make it an octave higher. So like this one means that you just play everything an octave higher. An octave is kind of like 8. So on the keyboard, if you have a C, you count 8 notes to the next C. You just start from there. So you just play everything 8 notes, 8 steps higher. So actually, I want to show a demonstration here. So if you don't have this, if I play this using the play button right here, it sounds like this. So then, but if I use this octave right here, it's gonna sound 8 steps higher. So that's basically what it does. These ones are the pedals. So in piano, you have 3 things at the bottom, and then the very rightmost thing is the pedal, which the pedal is basically, it makes either your music more smooth, more legato, or gives like a more, I guess, like flowing feeling. So you can also add pedal as well. You usually put pedal in the bottom of each of these things. You can put pedal right here or put pedal right here. So let's say you want to pedal only the first 2 notes. Then usually when you put it in the left hand, so you can just like actually highlight this one right here. You press this, you can make it however long you want. And then the violin is just like if you want to have like a repeat. So let's say you want to repeat these. If you want to repeat everything here, you just have this repeat bar right here. The text is for like more expression wise. So let's say you want to in violin you have something called pizzicato. So if you do this, it means that in violin you're going to be pizzicatoing that note. Grace, do you mind explaining what pizzicato means in violin?
Yeah, sure. So, there are two parts of a violin, right? There's the violin itself, and then there's a bow. Pizzicato essentially means that you kind of just like ditch the bow and you pluck the strings on your violin instead. So you're using your finger. Typically, people would just like use their pointer finger, and you just pluck all the notes instead of using a bow.
Oh yeah, that's right. And also, I don't think it's gonna work if you have like a piano bar right here, because if you scroll up, this is actually like a piano's sheet music. So if you want to add a violin, you can go to, I think it was edit, you go to instruments, and then here you can find instruments. So here you have the violin, you can add it to the score. If you want to make this above the piano, which is usually the case in most like more concert or orchestra music, you can press this up arrow, now you have the violin on top. So here you have the violin on top, now you can put things like pizzicato and other things as well. The text is also used for expressions. So let's say you use like a word to slow down, which is retardando. You can put this somewhere where you want to slow down. The tempo is like how fast or slow you want to make it, and then you can experiment with which ones sound good for the music that you're doing. These are more dynamic markings. Like here, it's like really quiet to like all the way until you get really loud right here. And you can do this for like any note that you want. You can just like press one of these and then just like click one of these. Um, these ones I don't really use very often, but they're basically still like more repeats, like where you want to repeat, where you don't want to repeat. And I think that's most of it. Let me see. Oh, also, I can show like a demonstration of something that I composed in last February, I think it was. So it's called Journey of the Seas. It's kind of like more classical music, but it's also like combining the classical era styles, which you'll learn about, and also like modern styles. So I can show like the first page of this composition. So to break it down, I basically formed this into like three different sections. So like the section that you just heard is called like the A section. Thank you. Yeah. I took like I think it was like 10 months to create this. I don't know why, but like I feel like if you're composing on sheet music, it's gonna take a long time. So like if you're like maybe Bach or maybe Mozart, it depends on like how much time you have. But basically compositions can take a long while, but it's really fun to make as well. So basically, for this one, I made it into three sections. I have like A, B, and C. So in A section, I have it in this key, which is E flat major. So in this key, it goes all the way until here. This is like the very end, signaling at the very end. And starting from this note, the key signature changed. So now it's E flat minor, and then you have like a more sad movement right here. And this one goes on until it goes back to A. I think it goes back to A around here. Yeah, so here you can see it kind of repeats a little bit. And then here I have another one, which is the C section. So for this one, it's actually in D flat. I think it was either major or minor, but this is the part for here. So you can have your composition be like parts as well, or you can make it more free or maybe like more unique where you don't have these parts. Because like having ABC sections is mostly like for the classical era, which is like I think around the 1800s. But more modern music, they don't really have like structured parts in their music. So if you're going to make your own composition, you can create it however you want. You can combine it any kind of styles that you want as well. To break down some of the things that you've seen, so here is like the tempo marking. I made it quarter note 66, And then these words are basically like tempo words. These are like Italian words that basically mean you're playing it in a very dignified, very like declaring manner. It's like very like prideful, very proud. And then here it's kind of like also the same thing, like you're very decisive, you're playing it like you know what you're doing. Here's like the accent, which means that I'm playing it like really loud. Here it's like I go up and I go down, which means that I crescendo and then I decrescendo. And then these are just basically still the same like accents, accenting this note. And this one means the slur and also like these notes right here. It means to just like hold it a little bit longer to make it more smooth and legato. As you can see, I also have pedal markings as well. If I scroll down here, I have more text words. This is kind of like more gracious, more singing, because then you have like this left hand that's like repeating. And then as you can see, I use like a variety of textures. Like I sometimes have like fast notes, sometimes I have like slow notes. So if you want to make your own composition, you can vary that as well. So basically, in the next few workshops, we're going to be going over more in detailed things so that in the coming months or anything like that, you can start creating your own composition. And we can also give you tips on how to like where to change or where it's good and where you can improve as well. And basically just like use what you have in the palettes. Just like use anything that you like. If you want to know what these Italian words mean, I think there's like a Wikipedia page where you can find like any kind of tempo words or any kind of dynamic words that you can use in your music. Most of them are going to be in Italian. Oh yeah, here is like the retardando, which means that you're suddenly slowing down. So unfortunately, like this MuseScore player, it doesn't really show that you slow down. But if you were to play this by yourself, of course you're going to be slowing down. I think that is it for this MuseScore. Actually, Grace, do you mind sharing your screen again? I think there's something else that I want to show.
Yeah, give me a second. Let's see. There you go. Oh, I need to full screen it, but
Sure. If you go to the YouTube video on that same screen, so basically, okay, so before you click that, basically,
okay.
If you play any kind of instrument such as like a violin or piano, another like alternative way to compose is just like composing on your own instrument. So here, I play the piano, so I basically just kind of like sat down the piano and played some chords. So basically, or you can do both, or if you can sit down at your instrument and play something and then kind of record it using sheet music, that's also a good idea as well. So there's many different ways to compose. This is just like an example of what I composed in last January too. Oh, I think to share your sound. So if you go to like your share screen, there's like something that says like share sound as well. It's like at the very bottom of the share screen thing.
Technical issues. Okay.
Because that's basically what I composed in C major. As you can see, there's a lot of C major scales and C major chords. And we will also go more in depth onto these like music theory things, how to create your own chords, different styles. But I think that's all for today. Thank you guys for coming. I hope to see you guys in the next few workshops.